We are live on ABC's KMET 1490am.com. Your number one spot right here for news and talk on the West Coast.
One such ball hawk was number 59, the 9-year veteran middle linebacker, Jim Cheyunski.
And you just heard mentioned the name of our next guest. I welcome to the program former NFL pro linebacker, Jim Cheyunski. Jim, honor to have you. Brian C.
Yes, sir. How are you?
Very well, Jim. Jim, I want to begin very early on, growing up in Massachusetts. How did you first become interested in the game of football?
Well, back then, that's way back, but we only had 3 or 4 men's sports in my high school, and I loved all sports, football, baseball, basketball. I played them all. Couldn't wait for one to start and the other one to stop, and so I didn't know what sport I wanted to be a pro in, but I remember the teacher going around when I was very young and asking, how they do. They ask what you want to be when you grow up, and I said a professional athlete. And from then on, just that's how it turned out, really.
And we're going to fast forward to your college years where you were playing at Syracuse. And at Syracuse, Jim, you were known for calling defensive signal plays and being the team leader in tackles those final 2 seasons. So my question to you is, how well did you feel college prepared you for the NFL?
Well, I'll tell you, it's a funny thing about Syracuse that, of course, it's probably the coldest place I have been in my life. It's unbelievable conditions up there. But we had a ex-paratrooper, Ben Schwartzwalder, as a coach. And he was as tough as they came, and there's no question about it. When I ended up getting drafted by the Patriots, it felt like I was on vacation as far as their practices compared to Syracuse practices. So I was pretty well prepared for what was to come in the NFL.
Wow! So at Syracuse, you really got some heavy-duty training, huh?
Yeah, and we had some great ball players there when I was a freshman. First time we walked in the locker room, Floyd Little was sitting there, Tom Coughlin was sitting there. Year after that, Larry Zonka came in. So we had some heavy duty ball players there, and if you were going to play for them, you had to be pretty decent.
Right, and you mentioned the Patriots. Now, 1968 was the year you were drafted number 12 by the Boston Patriots. Do you recall how you first heard and your reaction to being picked by the Pats?
I can't. Well, I can't tell you exactly how I heard, but I'm sure it was we lived just a short distance away from where they played the ball games and so on and so forth. So, and then a story had gone out that one of the stories that had gone out is one of their top scouts, Rami Loud, had stopped into my dad's gas station. We had a gas station right on Route 106 there, headed towards Foxborough, and he asked my dad, it's pretty big looking boy you got there. What, does he play any sports and so on and so forth? So a lot of that story, some of it's true, I guess, some of it's probably embellished, but it was nice being chosen by by a team that was right in my state that I grew up in. But we were really, really struggling back then. That was when the Patriots were just trying to build. And everybody thinks of the Patriots now as, of course, one of the top professional teams ever. But it took a while. I had 5 different coaches in 5 years, and so I was a small linebacker really for the NFL, and I had to prove myself every year, and so that was kind of a tough thing. And then the defense. We were on the field all the time, so we took a beating. So physically, it was tough.
Well, Jim, you definitely proved yourself. In '68, you made all-rookie team middle linebacker. Do you remember that very first game in which you stepped on the field? How emotional was that for you?
Well, I don't know. The emotion. As soon as you get on the field, and I think it's same with me as it is most ball players. You forget about the crowd. You forget about everything except for doing what you're supposed to do. And my job was to make tackles, and so that's what I did. And it was against the Kansas City Chiefs, and it was probably still one of the top games that I played my entire career. And I was just a young kid, just trying to learn. But I have a saying, even when I was coaching, for my players, was see ball, get ball. And so make it just as simple as that. You just get to the ball and you do things right.
Yeah, like I mentioned, 68, you made all-rookie team, middle linebacker. Following year, 1969, Jim, you performed solidly well. You set a club mark with 138 tackles. And I want to ask you, who do you feel was the hardest player to defend?
Oh boy, that's a tough question because I played against.
Tough question.
I played against some of the best. I played with some of the best. Of course, Larry Zonker and I were teammates and captains at Syracuse, and then I played against Larry for my whole NFL career. He was a beast to try to bring down, but my method of tackling was to tackle very low. So it really doesn't matter how big you are. If I can hit you below the knees, you're going to go down. The guys that were the toughest for me were guys who were very, very quick, like Terry Metcalf and O.J. Simpson and some of those guys. And, because I made my living on being quick. So to try to catch the guys who were quick was tough, The other guys, it didn't matter how big or strong they were. If I could get to them, they would usually go down, even though I might take a beating sometime because of it,
Right. And you mentioned being quick. I mean, you were known late 60s, mid 70s. You were known to being a player to have durability and speed and strength. And do you recall your workout regimen, Jim, those years? Were you a big jogger? Did you squat weights? What was your workout regimen?
Well, back in those days, it was very, very different, especially coming from I was from a very small high school in Massachusetts, one of the lowest leagues in the whole state. So you really didn't have much training. I was fortunate to have for a few of my first few years as a high school player, I had a tremendous coach as far as football knowledge and everything, but as far as weightlifting, and so we didn't have much of that. So I would do anything I could, I would, while other guys would be at the beach and things like that, I'd be running around the track and with a 20-pound weight jacket on, and bought a set of weights myself and just did the best I could because we really didn't have any specific training until I got up to Syracuse. Of course, then it got a lot more serious as far as physical training.
We're talking with Jim Cheyunski, former NFL linebacker. Jim, 1969, you were part of that historic year in Patriots land. That was the conversion from Boston to the New England area. What do you remember most about that transition?
Probably the thing that comes to mind when they first opened up. I don't know exactly what the time period was, but it was when they first opened up Foxborough Stadium. I think it was an exhibition game that we went to, and they hadn't figured out the parking lots and the traffic problems and so on and so forth that they were going to have with a professional football team in Foxborough. And I remember we went to the game, and then my wife and I didn't get back home till about 2 a.m.
Wow.
So we said, "Boy, man, we hope we get this straightened out before the season starts."
And you were playing in Fenway Park, is that correct? Before Foxborough?
Yeah, that was the best field I've ever played on, Brian, as far as a turf. It was,
really?
It was unbelievable. But the one bad thing about it was we're sitting at Fenway Park, the way they had us sitting down, the fans were directly behind us. And, boy, we weren't very good in those days. And, man, as stuff can be thrown down at the field and people yelling at you. So we said, wow, this is pro football? Oh, man.
And then a couple of years later, Jim, 1971, you played with a young Jim Plunkett. He came into town, and at that time, he was the Heisman Trophy winner. Any personal thoughts on how a young Plunkett was regarded in the locker room?
Well, he was regarded as the poor guy was regarded as it's supposed to be our savior, you know, because we couldn't score, we couldn't do anything, and so to me, was just an absolutely tremendous kid, very, very tough athlete. I remember a couple of the coaches that had come in there would make us do a 6-minute mile, or some of them the 6-minute miles, and some of them had to run two miles. And you know, a lot of the older guys that played in the AFL there, they weren't used to anything like that. You know, they said we're not track stars, we're runners. But I can remember Jim being out there, and he just beat everybody by, I don't know, 400 or 500 yards. He just would run. But we almost killed the poor kid because he didn't get much blocking. And so he really didn't blossom until after he left us, you know. Right.
And then around, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, but then we also had Joe Caff, and we had, we had, it was like a revolving door there, coaches as well as players.
Yeah, I mean, you played with some historical figures. Even you played for a young Coach Belichick. Is that correct?
Yeah, Coach Belichick was he was on the staff at Baltimore when I was at Baltimore, and he was just starting to go through his training then.
Right. And before the Colts, now 1973, you went to the Bills in that 6-player trade with the Patriots. How was your reaction knowing you were leaving the Patriots heading to the Bills?
Well, it's one of the best things that ever happened to me because, of course, we weren't winning. We didn't win anything, and I was just getting beat up physically. And so I ended up being a captain with O.J. Simpson. I was defensive captain. He was offensive captain. And we had the 2 years I was there, we had a very good defense and excellent offense. And we first year we just missed going out, just missed the playoffs. Second year we went to the playoffs and got beat by Pittsburgh. And Simpson broke the rushing record up there too.
And Jim, you mentioned O.J. How was O.J. the player?
Probably, Brian. He was. There's never been anybody that's any better. I mean, he's absolutely one of the top players in the NFL as running backs. And I played against him, of course, with him and against him. And it's sure better having him on your team than it is, playing against him. He could break it at any time, with any type of weather. A lot of times he ran in the mud and the snow better than he did on a dry field. He run as fast as he wanted to go. I don't know if you remember about the back then they had a show called The Superstars, and they'd bring guys on and let them do some running, some weightlifting, so on and so forth. And they had the guys run a 40-yard dash, and Simpson beat everybody by about 15 yards. And he was about 6'2", 215 or so, and he could lift 270 pounds over his head. And so he was tough, he was strong. He could make some moves that were just unbelievable. And I felt very fortunate, to have him on the team when I was there, and I felt very fortunate I had some good games against him too. So, but it was the teams that I played on. We were all in the same division, so I get to know everybody's plays, and I was always friends for some reason with the offensive linemen, and so it was funny being out there on the field with those guys because there's a lot of trash talking going on,
Right. Yeah. No. I mean, O.J. a remarkable player. Now, Jim, I read something in which you mentioned that the Buffalo fans are very loyal. From what I hear, you really enjoyed playing at Buffalo compared to New England and the Colts.
Well, I think it's mainly the atmosphere. If you win, everything's good. You know what I mean? If you lose, nothing's good. But the Buffalo fans, of course, I was went to school at Syracuse, so that wasn't that far away. So I just love the hardworking. And I was Lithuanian, and there's a lot of Lithuanian and Polish people up there, so they like me and I like them. But the Baltimore people were fabulous fans too, and all the fans that stuck with you they were all good. But the Boston fans, they just suffered. In fact, in those days, because we were just trying to build the team. Now, then they profited for many, many years after that when Belichick got there.
Right, and you mentioned Belichick as playing for Belichick as well. You also play for Saban. How is playing for Coach Saban? Did you guys get along well?
Lou was kind of a funny guy. He more or less, even though he was I believe his background was, I think he was an ex-linebacker or on defense someplace. But you wouldn't know it because he was strictly, he tended to be more involved with the offense. And back then, I think we might have even got into the Super Bowl or went further if we had thrown the ball a little bit more. But he just wanted to turn around and go unbalanced line and hand the ball off to OJ all the time. And if you get up against a real good defense like the Pittsburgh Steelers we did in the playoffs, and you're doing the same thing all the time, you're not going to succeed. And we had a great quarterback. Joe Ferguson was an excellent quarterback.
Very good.
So, I think if we had been a little bit more versatile in our offense, we would have done even better.
Yeah, and then around 75, you became a Colt, and that was the year in which you performed very well. The first game versus the Jets, you won that game, and it was the first victory out of 9 consecutive wins that year for the Colts in 75. So I want to ask you, how was it playing against Joe Namath?
Oh, against Joe Namath? Well, Joe and I worked together. We worked together at his summer camp, his summer football camp, so I knew Joe very well, and of course played against him twice a year for my whole career, and he was Joe was quite a guy. I believe if he had started on a different team where he had a little bit more protection, he would have set every record there was in football. He was great, but he also got physically beat up, before they won the Super Bowl that year. But it was fun. It was fun because knowing each other back in those days, we ran a 4-3 defense, and middle linebacker would line up facing their center, and of course Joe was right behind the center, and he'd be calling the plays, and I'd be switching the defenses, and we'd look back and forth at each other and kind of chuckle and give each other heck, and so we had a good time.
And Jim, you quickly showed the Colts you meant business, 76-77. I mean, you were already considered a veteran linebacker. You became a leader, or a part of the defensive unit those 2 years, 76 and 77. So you were already considered like a pioneer middle linebacker during those years. So did some of your peers respect you, the early rookies in the locker room that year, 76-77? You were already considered a pioneer middle linebacker.
Well, I mean, it was the end of my career, and actually my knees were absolutely horrible. So towards the end of actually both those years, the 75, we had the best turnaround in NFL football history. We won those 9 to 10 games in a row, and got beat by the Steelers. And so it was, unfortunately, I was on teams with Buffalo and Baltimore that lost to the Steelers 3 years in a row. So I liked playing against them, but we couldn't beat them. Their defense was too tough. But the Colts were the best all-around team that I played on. Number one, because of Macho Broda was our coach. He was a tremendous coach. And I knew defenses. I made my living about being able to find where the ball was and read plays, and I did a lot of film study and so on and so forth. And so even though I was hampered by some bad legs, I was still leading the team in tackles because I just could. When I got on the field, I forgot everything else except going to get the ball, And we had some good time with the Colts. They were great teammates. It was the best defensive line that I had ever played with. I think if I had started with those guys, I don't know if I would ever have gotten hurt. They were just absolutely a tremendous defensive line. And of course, Burt Jones was our quarterback, and again, I said, Mark Trabota was our coach. So we had a good organization there for sure.
Now, Jim, something that I did not realize, reading the back of one of your football cards, Topps mentions that during the off-season, mid-1970s, you worked as a contractor.
Well, back in those days, Brian, it wasn't like it is now. We all had to have jobs. We had to have jobs in the off season. So I sold cars. I worked at a bank. Worked as a contractor over at Martha's Vineyard and building homes, and so we did whatever we could to support our families.
Yeah, and also, since I'm on the topic of football cards, something that always struck me, your rookie football card is considered 1973, but as we discussed, you came in playing for the Pats in 68, 69. I'm not sure why Topps has your rookie card 1973. Any recollection on taking photographs for the Topps company back then?
No, we really never knew, what pictures they were going to use or anything like that. And really, for most of our careers, and even now, I probably get 3 or 4 requests per week. Even now, they want you to sign the cards and send them back, and so on and so forth. But the Players Association for football really never they never pressed to get the players compensated for signing pictures or signing cards or anything like that, like the baseball players do. They get $12 to $15,000 every single year for signing their cards. We get nothing, and so that's how it was back then. Now, of course, it's a lot different as far as what the guys get paid and so on and so forth. But it was a whole different ball game back then. People think, well, these guys play football; they're all rich, and but that was the furthest thing from it. But we played it back then, especially because we loved it, and the players went out of their way to. Like at charity golf tournaments and things like that, to talk to the people. They didn't just come and then take off. It was a whole different universe back then.
Yeah, I mean, now it's really an entertainment business with all the media outlets paying astronomical figures, astronomical money to all these players now. And, you guys, you really played very, very difficult times. The equipment wasn't as advanced as it is today. I mean, they should definitely take care of the old timers. They really should.
Yeah, I mean, especially being one of the richest corporations in the world. There would be no problem for them to do that. And we were really with the guys and the guys before me too. I mean, I still play golf with a guy by the name of Milt Plum, who was a quarterback. He was a quarterback for Detroit and Cleveland when Jimmy Brown played, and he was a generation before me. So it goes way back.
Yeah, and I have a few minutes left, Jim. You also became a athletic director, coach at high school Providence. Is that correct?
Episcopal High School.
How was the coaching life like for you?
Well, next to playing, it's the best thing that I could have done. I mean, it's really gratifying to be able to take a young fella and teach him not only about football but about life and some of the mistakes that you made and some of the things that you learned in your career, and turn around and I see some of these guys now. They're married. They get 3 or 4 kids and things like that. It's very, very satisfying to be able to teach them something, then see them go out on the field and actually, do what you taught them to do. And so I was pretty much a mental type guy as far as, my defensive experience really helped me be a very, very good offensive coach because I knew how to beat defenses. And so I had a lot of fun, making plays and putting offenses in and putting defenses in and coaching kids. And so it was very satisfying.
And they're telling me I have 1 minute. So what have you been doing with your life now, Jim? Any projects you're working on? What's going on in the life of the legendary Jim Cheyunski?
Well, just surviving is pretty good,
Crazy
but
times.
Finally, I've had the 2 best parts of my body are my 2 artificial knees, and but I've had some couple of failed back surgeries, so unfortunately, I've got to use a cane now, which just really bothers me a lot. But hey, you got to take the good with the bad, and so I'm at least able to get myself some sort of a workout and be able to move around and count my blessings. I got a wonderful, wonderful family and 8 grandkids, and so the important things I've been really blessed with, and so that's I'm very thankful for that.
And I believe you have a birthday coming up, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I got that fact from the back of your football card, so I want to wish you a happy birthday.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah. So anytime you want to come on and chat, just send me an email. We'll set it up.
All right, we'll do that, Brian. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure, sir. And stay safe. Happy birthday. Happy holidays.
All right. Merry Christmas to you.
Thank you so much. That was former Boston, New England Patriots, Buffalo Bills, and Colts icon, Jim Cheyunski. Thank you, Jim. Until next week, happy collecting to all.